Hello and welcome to Auto Shenanigans. My name is John. Thank you very much for joining us. Today marks the start of a new series where we're going to look at some of the forgotten racetracks that are dotted around England. We've everything from drag strips to F1 circuits in a series that blends history, motorsport and a little bit of urban exploring. I like these sort of things and I hope you do too. Let's get things started, and today we've come down to Surrey to have a look at what remains of the old Brooklands race circuit. In 1903, the Motor Car Act was passed. Driving licences, vehicle registrations and speed limits were just some of the fun and exciting things that were introduced. The speed limit was actually met with some opposition by Roger Wallace, who was chairman of the then quite renowned Automobile Club, who later became known as the RAC. Good old Roger didn't want any speed limits whatsoever, but unfortunately a compromise wasn't found and it was forced through anyway, resulting in a 20-mile-an-hour speed limit across the country. The good news was, though, is that that was at least an increase from the previous speed limit of 14 miles per hour. At the time, the British motor industry was very much in its infancy, with 50% of the cars owned in the country being built in France. This was a concern to many industry professionals who thought without somewhere to conduct high-speed testing of automobiles, efforts in research and development would be hampered and the motor industry fall behind to other countries. Enter Hugh Fortescue Lock King, the man with a plan and the money. Work started in 1906 to build a vehicle proving and testing ground. In 1907, the world's first purpose-built vehicle testing ground and race circuit was completed. It was opened as Brooklands Race Circuit. Its first layout was a large banked oval circuit which was around 2.75 miles long. The track width was a staggering 30 metres and the banked curves reached 9 metres in places. The banked parts of the track made up 1.25 miles of the circuit. In addition to the oval track, a bisecting finishing straight was built, taking the track total length up to 3.25 miles. 11 days after opening, Brooklands hosted its first race, a 24-hour event in which 3 cars competed to take the world record for longest distance travelled. Racing driver Selwyn Edge took the win, having covered 1,581 miles at an average speed of 65 miles per hour, which may not sound very fast by today's standards, but in 1907, your 60-brake horsepower Napier race car was probably not going to do much more. That said, it was a world record, and that stood for 18 years. Like all good car enthusiasts and race drivers, Edge modified his race car with a larger fuel tank, removed body panels to reduce weight, and he installed a special-shaped windscreen which might demonstrate a very early example of consideration towards aerodynamics. Your tyres would have been as thin as a Rizzler and probably had a similar grip level, and when it came to driving at night, the track was lit with a few hundred railway lamps and the edge marked out with flares. Don't forget that in some parts, that edge would have been a 9-metre drop. Of course, being 1907, there wasn't much by way of health and safety. For another 7 years, Brooklands enjoyed many a racing event. However, due to a small disagreement in 1914, it closed as a race circuit and opened as an airfield. It wasn't until 1920 that the track was finally handed back, and the condition of the venue left a lot to be desired. It took 6 years to make the necessary repairs, but finally in 1926, Brooklands was back in business, and it was at this time that the British Grand Prix was established at Brooklands Race Circuit. Following his victories in the French Grand Prix a few years earlier, driver Henry Seagrave wanted to bring the race to Britain. And with his victories increasing the interest in the sport as a whole, there was quite a lot of support, and Brooklands was the ideal venue. Much more racing continued and everyone was having a wonderful time, but then in 1939, another small disagreement put a halt to proceedings. The disagreement lasted until 1945, and during this time, the aero industry dominated Brooklands, with companies such as Hawker and Vickers setting up factories on the site. Along with those factories, they also slotted in a large runway to accommodate the bomber planes that they were building. In an effort to disguise the factories, They planted trees right in the middle of the race circuit, the hope being that the enemy aircraft flying above wouldn't notice the factories, airfield and race circuit, etc. Unfortunately, this didn't really work, and in 1940 the area was struck by enemy aircraft. With the second small disagreement over, in 1946 aero company Vickers Armstrong purchased the site and remained here for many years after. But what had happened to the racing? Well, that ended in 1939. And nobody realised. The circuit was handed over to the military as part of the war effort, and it was never given back for the purpose of racing. That said, it had suffered extensive damage throughout the war, so it's perhaps unlikely to have ever returned to its former glory. So it's now 2022, and I've come to see what remains of this infamous circuit. Whilst Brooklands is an abandoned race circuit, there's an awful lot going on in the area. You've got the Brooklands Museum, who can tell you everything there is to know about the racetrack history and the airfield history. It's a little bit pricey to get in, but it's an excellent day out. As for what remains of the track, well, there's actually quite a lot to be getting on with. We're going to start with the Byfleet banking, which is where I am now. It's a wonderful example that demonstrates the banked section of track and really how high it was. It's been intersected by the A318, but large sections still remain. The Brooklands Museum sits right next to the start and finish line, and just up round the corner from there you have the members banking, which was the opposite side of the track from where we are now. In addition to that, just on the other side you have the railway straight. I think that's now in use by Mercedes-Benz for driving experiences, etc., but there's a road right next door, so if you want to see it, you can at least get a visual. And there we are, ladies and gentlemen. That's Brooklands Race Circuit. I very much hope you liked the video. If you did, there is a button specifically for that, and you might be inclined to hit the subscribe button for more content like this. I hope you guys enjoy the rest of your week. I shall see you guys next time for another episode of Forgotten Racetracks. Right, I've got to get down now. Shit. You don't realise how steep this really is until you come here. It's absolutely stupid. Yes, I've left the cameras and audio running intentionally for when I fall flat on my face. Okay, we got it. Whoa. No, that's rubbish. Redo it. And then the aero companies. This is bullshit. Just read what's there, mate. It's just there. Read it. The Brooklands Museum sits on the finishing straight where the Brooklands Museum sits on the finishing straight where the stuff. The Brooklands Museum. I can't say it. Fuck's sake. Shit bed. Precarious.